The world of Talvora had once been a jewel of the stars. Shining towers stretched into the skies. Great rivers flowed between green valleys, and the alien people lived without fear. But now, that same sky was choked with fire. Enemy warships, massive and merciless, filled the heavens above. They blotted out the light of Talvora's twin suns, casting shadows over broken cities. The ground trembled as orbital bombardments rained down. Towers collapsed in clouds of dust. Families fled into dark tunnels beneath the surface, clutching their children, whispering prayers to silent gods. In the underground command chamber, the leaders of Talvora stood together, their faces pale with despair. The war had already lasted months and their fleets were gone. Their armies were crushed. Their weapons were nothing compared to the enemy's endless firepower. They were cornered prey waiting to be finished. The eldest among them, a silver-skinned high speaker, raised his trembling hands. We have no choice, he whispered. We must send the call. Others shifted uneasily. Some shook their heads. The call was their last hope, their last shame. It was a plea broadcast across the stars, begging for help from strangers, from species they had never met. One counselor hissed, "What if no one answers? What if we waste our final chance in desperation?" The high speaker closed his eyes. "If we do not try, then our children will die knowing we did nothing." Silence fell. Then, with heavy hearts, they agreed. The great beacon in the chamber was activated. A low hum filled the air, rising in pitch until it rattled their bones. A pulse of light spread outward, carrying their plea across systems, across void, across the endless galaxy. The message was simple, stripped of pride. We are under attack. We are dying. We beg for aid to any who hear us. Please. The beacon released its signal into the blackness. Then, silence, the leaders waited. 1 minute, 10 minutes, an hour. Nothing came. In the tunnels below, families clung to each other as the bombardment shook the earth. Children asked their parents, "Will someone come for us?" But the parents had no answer. The council's hope withered. Their words turned bitter. "No one will come," muttered one. "We were fools to think strangers would risk themselves for us. We are alone." The high speaker bowed his head. His people had begged the galaxy for mercy, and the galaxy had turned its face away, and then a sound broke through the static. A voice. Calm, steady, sharp as a blade. Message received. The chamber froze. Every alien turned toward the beacon. Their skin shivered as the strange voice echoed through the walls. It was unlike any voice they had heard. Rougher, deeper, carrying a weight of iron. "Identify yourself," one counselor demanded. "Who speaks?" The reply came after a brief pause. "We are human." The word meant nothing to them. They searched their memories, their records, their archives. No star maps, no trade logs, no history spoke of humans. They were unknown. Ghosts from beyond the edges of familiar space. But their voice, it was steady. It was dangerous. It was the kind of voice that did not ask questions. It promised action. The high speaker dared to speak. You received our plea. Will you help us?" For a hot beat there was silence again. Then the voice answered. "Help is coming." The words rang through the chamber like a thunderclap. The counselors stared at one another. Some gasped in disbelief. Others trembled. But none of them missed the tone in that alien voice. It was not the voice of mercy. It was not the voice of pity. It was something far more unsettling. It was the voice of predators. The high speaker swallowed hard. "What manner of people are you?" he whispered. No answer came. The signal went dead. The chamber remained frozen in silence. Only the sound of distant bombardments shook the air. Yet something had changed. For the first time in months, the leaders of Talvora felt a strange flicker deep inside them. Was it hope? Or was it fear? Far above in the dark heavens, the enemy fleet continued its assault, unaware that across the void something had stirred. Something that had heard the desperate cry of a dying world, and that something had promised to come. But who were these humans? Why did their voice carry such cold certainty? The people of Talvora could only wait and wonder, would these strangers be saviors? Or would they be monsters far worse than the enemy already at their gates? Only time would tell. The skies over Talvora burned for 3 more days. The enemy's warships hung above like carrion birds, striking whenever they wished, raining fire upon the helpless. Every day the tunnels grew more crowded. Every day more voices were silenced. The people whispered about the strange signal. The word human passed from mouth to mouth like a secret. Some spoke it with awe, others with dread, but no one knew who or what these humans truly were. The council waited, but doubt gnawed at them. Perhaps the signal had been a cruel trick. Perhaps no help would come. And then, on the fourth day, the sky changed. At first it was only a flicker on the long-range scanners. A faint ripple in the void. The enemy ships noticed nothing. They were too busy tightening their noose around the dying world. But in the council's command chamber, alarms rang. Eyes widened. Dozens of ships had appeared at the edge of the system, emerging from the blackness. Their drive signatures were unlike anything the Talvarans had ever seen. The councillors leaned close to the displays. The ships were not massive. They were not fleets of dreadnoughts or hulking carriers. No, these vessels were small, lean, built for speed, not for intimidation. Is this all of them? A councillor asked in disbelief. The scan confirmed it. Barely 24 ships. Against an enemy fleet of hundreds. Then we are lost, another said bitterly. They mock us, sending so few, but the high speaker only stared at the displays. There was something in the way those ships moved, like blades being drawn. The enemy finally noticed. Warships shifted in formation, their massive guns turning toward the new arrivals. They laughed across their channels, mocking the tiny intruders, but the intruders did not answer. They only advanced. Moments later, the first human ship broke through the atmosphere. The people of Talvora, huddled in their shelters, looked up as a sharp silhouette streaked across the burning sky. It was angular, purposeful, as if designed for the sole act of cutting through enemies. Behind it came others, weaving through fire with impossible precision. The council watched breathlessly as the human ships landed near the last stronghold. Dust and smoke filled the air as their engines cooled. A ramp opened. The first humans stepped out. The Talvarans had imagined tall warriors clad in golden armor. They had imagined saviors glowing with power. Instead, what emerged looked ordinary, smaller than expected. 2 legs, 2 arms, pale skin hidden beneath black armor marked with scars. But it was their eyes that froze the councillors in place. Cold, sharp, restless eyes that belonged not to prey but to predators. The human commander removed their helmet. Their face was weathered, lines carved by struggle. Their gaze swept across the alien leaders as though weighing them. Judging them, one councillor dared to speak. "Those are the ones who answered our call." The human's voice was the same one from the beacon, calm, steady, dangerous. "Yes, you—" The councillor hesitated. "You are so few. Where are the rest of your armies? Your fleets? We begged for salvation, but you bring only—" The human cut him off with a glance, a slow, deliberate look that silenced the chamber. "You asked for help," the commander said. "And you have it." The Talvarans exchanged uneasy glances. They did not understand. They wanted armies. They wanted legions. Instead, they had been given a handful of strangers. The high speaker's voice trembled. "Forgive me, but the enemy numbers in the millions. How can so few of you hope to stand against them?" For the first time, a faint smile touched the human's lips. It was not a smile of comfort. It was a smile that belonged to someone who had faced death many times and survived. "You misunderstand," the human said. "You don't need armies. A few of us are enough." The chamber went silent. The words were spoken with such certainty that none dared argue. The humans spread out across the stronghold, moving with quiet confidence. They inspected defenses, studied the skies, and spoke little. The Talvarans watched them with unease. These were not saviors of light. They were not merciful saints. They were something else entirely. That night, as bombardments shook the earth, one Talvaran child crept to the edge of the human camp. He stared at them in wonder. They sat around dim lights, sharpening weapons, checking gear. Their voices were low, their laughter rough. One human looked up, meeting the child's eyes. For a heartbeat, the child froze. But instead of snarling, the human reached into a pack and tossed the child a ration bar. The child caught it blinking, before scurrying back into the shadows. The human returned to sharpening their blade. In the command chamber, the council argued in whispers. Were these strange beings truly their saviors? Or had they summoned predators even more dangerous than the ones who hunted them now? But when the high speaker closed his eyes, he remembered the human's words. "A few of us are enough." It was madness. It was impossible, and yet Something in that cold, steady voice made him wonder. Perhaps for the first time the enemy would learn fear. The morning after the humans' arrival, the skies over Talvora thundered with the roar of enemy bombardments. Whole districts vanished in firestorms. Dust and smoke rolled across the horizon like black waves. Inside the command chamber, the Talvoran Council gathered with the human commander. The air was heavy with tension. The high speaker, voice trembling, gestured to the burning skies. "You see it yourself. The enemy will not stop until we are ash and silence. Tell us the truth. How can so few of you hope to fight them?" The human commander leaned forward. Their armor creaked as they rested both hands on the table. Their eyes, sharp and unblinking, swept across the room. "You asked why we are so few," the human said, their voice low. "It is because we do not need more." The councillors frowned in confusion. One muttered, "Madness?" The human ignored it. "Your world is gentle. Your people grew in peace. But ours?" The commander's tone sharpened. "Our world tried to kill us every day we lived upon it." The Talvorans leaned closer despite themselves. "Our skies are torn with storms that can shatter mountains. Our oceans breed predators that swallow ships whole. Our lands are filled with beasts that stalk us in the night, each one strong enough to tear us apart. And if the beasts or storms don't kill us, then the plagues will. Diseases that burn through flesh, poisons that choke the air, seasons that freeze blood in our veins." The chamber went silent. One councillor whispered, How can anyone live on such a world?" The human's eyes glinted like steel. "By becoming stronger. On Earth the weak do not survive. Only those who fight, endure, and adapt live long enough to see another day. We are shaped by death itself. That is why we are few, because each of us is worth more than 1,000 ordinary soldiers." The aliens shivered. These words were not spoken with arrogance. They were spoken with the calm certainty of one who knew them to be true. Another human, standing guard by the door, gave a low laugh. "We call ourselves Deathworlders, because that is what Earth is. Her death world." The word echoed in the chamber like a hammer strike. Deathworlders. The councillors looked at one another with wide, fearful eyes. They had begged for help, and what had come to them were predators forged in the crucible of survival. The high speaker swallowed. "If what you say is true, then perhaps we were right to call you." The human commander gave a slow nod. "You were right. But understand this. Our help will not look like the mercy you imagine. When we fight, we do not fight with kindness. We fight to win. And we do not stop until the enemy is broken." The Talvorans fell silent. Some flinched. Others lowered their heads, torn between gratitude and fear. Far above, the enemy fleet shifted, preparing another assault. The humans stood, their movements smooth, purposeful. The commander's voice grew colder. "You asked who we are. Now you know. We are Deathworlders, and your enemy has no idea what is coming for them." That evening, whispers spread through the tunnels of Talvora. The civilians huddled in the dark, speaking the word with awe and terror. Deathworlders. Mothers held their children tighter. Fathers wondered if they had summoned a storm they could not control. But the soldiers of Talvora, those who had lost everything, felt something else. For the first time in months, they felt a flicker of courage. If even half the humans' words were true, then perhaps, just perhaps, the enemy was not invincible after all. At midnight, a young Talvoran officer approached the humans as they prepared their weapons. The officer's voice shook as he asked, "Why come for us? Why risk yourselves for strangers?" The human paused, then answered quietly, "Because we remember." "Remember what?" The human's eyes turned distant, as though staring across centuries. "Once we cried for help, and no one came. We swore we would never let others suffer the same silence." The officer lowered his head. He could find no words. The human gave a faint smile, cold, tired, but real. "Rest easy. Tomorrow your enemy learns what it means to fight a Deathworlder." High above, the enemy commanders mocked the small human fleet, laughing at their numbers. They called them foolish, weak, doomed. They had no idea they had never faced predators from a death world. They would learn soon. The fourth dawn since humanity's arrival came with thunder. Not the thunder of storms, but the thunder of war. The enemy fleet moved with cold precision. Great carriers descended lower in orbit, their shadows blotting out the suns of Talvora. Dropships spilled from their bellies like black rain, streaking through the atmosphere, each one filled with armored soldiers and war machines. In the tunnels below, the people of Talvora trembled. They had seen this before. Each assault had broken their defenses further, driven them deeper underground. This would be the final strike, but this time the humans were waiting. On the surface, the alien stronghold bristled with crude barricades and battered defenses. Behind them, the Talvoran soldiers clutched their weapons with shaking hands. They had no faith left in victory. The humans, however, stood tall and calm. Their armor gleamed darkly in the morning light, their weapons heavy and strange, their movements sharp with discipline. They did not whisper. They did not tremble. They waited like predators crouched for the kill. The human commander walked the line, their voice carrying through the defenders. The enemy thinks you are prey. They think this world already belongs to them. Today we show them they are wrong. The Talvorans swallowed hard, their hearts pounding. The humans spoke as if victory was already certain, as if death itself bowed to them. The first enemy dropships roared overhead, engines screaming. They landed in the distance, kicking up fire and dust. Hatches burst open. Armored warriors poured out, towering in numbers, weapons blazing. War machines followed, massive beasts of steel and fire. The Talvorans flinched, already imagining their slaughter, but the humans didn't wait. The commander raised a hand, then dropped it. Now! The world exploded. Human weapons unleashed fire unlike anything the Talvorans had ever seen. Projectiles ripped through enemy armor as if it were paper. Explosions tore open the earth, scattering machines like toys. Snipers on the walls struck with unerring precision, each shot a kill, and then the humans charged. They did not hide behind their barricades. They surged forward, fast and merciless, cutting through smoke and fire. Their movements were ruthless, efficient, born of lifetimes spent fighting for survival. A single human tore into a squad of enemy soldiers, weaving between blasts, striking with brutal accuracy. Another vaulted onto a war machine, planted explosives and leapt away as it went up in flames. The Talvorans watched, stunned. These were not armies. These were storms given flesh. The enemy commanders, at first arrogant, now shouted in panic. Their soldiers faltered as fear spread like fire. They had never seen prey fight like this. Prey did not charge forward. Prey did not laugh in the middle of battle, but the humans did. Through smoke and blood, their laughter rang cold. Not joy, just the savage thrill of warriors who belonged in the heart of chaos. The Talvoran soldiers, trembling behind their barricades, found themselves rising. They saw the humans tearing into the enemy, and something inside them shifted. Their fear cracked, and in its place came rage. "For Talvora!" one shouted. And for the first time in months, the defenders surged forward too. Side by side with the humans, they fired, they struck, they screamed. The battlefield became a storm of fire. Enemy after enemy fell. War machines burned. Dropships tried to retreat, but human sharpshooters cut them down as they rose. The assault that was meant to crush the last resistance crumbled instead. From orbit, enemy commanders watched their troops falter, their formations collapse. Confusion rippled through their fleets. How could so few do so much? On the ground, the human commander stood among the smoke and bodies, their armor scorched, their blade red. Their voice cut through the chaos. "Push them back!" And the impossible happened. The enemy broke. The invaders who had crushed whole armies turned and fled, their machines limping, their warriors scattering. Dropships roared skyward in retreat, leaving wreckage behind. The defenders of Talvora stood frozen in disbelief. The ground was littered with the enemy dead. Fires burned in the distance. The air reeked of smoke and blood, but the stronghold still stood. The high speaker emerged from the tunnels, staring at the battlefield. His eyes widened at the sight of the humans, their black armor marked with ash, their eyes still sharp and dangerous. "You," he whispered. "I have turned them back." The human commander wiped their blade clean and slid it back into place. Their voice was steady, calm, almost bored. This was only the beginning. The counselors exchanged uneasy looks. Victory should have brought joy, but instead they felt a deeper chill, for they realized the truth. The humans were not just warriors. They were predators who had found their hunt, and the enemy who had once seemed unstoppable had just learned fear. High above Talvora, the enemy fleet gathered in silence. The commanders, once arrogant, now whispered among themselves. Their last assault should have been effortless. Their soldiers had numbered in the thousands, their machines in the dozens. Yet they had been crushed by a handful of strange beings and desperate defenders. Reports poured in from survivors. Their words were broken, trembling, filled with disbelief. They moved too fast. They laughed while we died. Not pray. Not pray at all. One commander slammed a fist against the console. Enough. They are only a few. We will drown them with numbers. But his words rang hollow. Even among hardened warriors, fear had taken root. On the ground, the people of Talvora emerged cautiously from the tunnels. For the first time in months, they stood beneath the open sky without fire raining upon them. The battlefield was a wasteland of smoke and shattered machines. The air stank of burned metal and blood. At the center of it all stood the humans. Their black armor was scarred, their weapons still warm from battle. They moved among the wreckage with the ease of predators, checking the field, ensuring no enemies remained. The Talvorans watched in silence. These strange allies had done the impossible. And yet the sight of them brought not only relief but unease. The High Speaker approached carefully. You fought as no one in the galaxy has ever fought. The enemy ran before you. What are you truly? The human commander turned, their face shadowed beneath a helmet. When they spoke, their voice was steady, almost calm. We are what the galaxy made us. We are what a death world requires. Your enemy thought they were hunters. Today, they learned the truth. They are prey. The words sent a shiver through the councillors. Far above, the enemy fleet seethed. Commanders barked orders, rallying their forces, demanding courage. But courage is fragile. Whispers moved faster than commands. Soldiers remembered the cold eyes of the humans, the laughter in the middle of slaughter. They remembered comrades falling, machines burning, ships torn apart by impossible ferocity. Fear spread like a plague. In the barracks, warriors muttered, "They cannot be killed." In the mess halls, they whispered, "They come from a death world." And in the silence of their ships, some asked, "If a handful could destroy us, what would an army of them do?" The commanders shouted, threatened, punished. But discipline cracked. For the first time, the invaders looked down upon a world not with hunger, but with hesitation. Back on Talvora, the defenders began to change. The Talvoran soldiers who had once cowered now stood straighter. They walked beside the humans, trying to imitate their steps, their confidence. They told one another, "If they can bleed the enemy, so can we." Children whispered stories of the Deathworlders, calling them monsters wrapped in human skin, allies born of nightmares. Mothers no longer prayed for survival. They prayed to stand behind the humans when the next battle came. The humans themselves showed no celebration. They repaired weapons, cleaned armor, and prepared for the next strike as though nothing had changed. For them, battle was not glory. Battle was life. The commanders spoke little, but when they did, their words carried weight. They are afraid now. Fear is a weapon sharper than any blade. We will cut them with it until they break. The Talvorans listened, uneasy but hopeful. They had seen fear before, on their own faces. Now, for the first time, it was the enemy who wore it. In the enemy flagship, the Supreme Commander stared at battle logs, replaying footage again and again. He saw his warriors falling under human fire. He saw machines torn open. He saw tiny black-armored figures charging into the heart of battle without hesitation. His second-in-command whispered, "What are they?" The commander's voice was cold. Deathworlders, beings who survive where none should. Beings forged by a world that wants them dead. We thought them weak because they were few. We were wrong. The second-in-command swallowed. Then, what do we do? The commander's gaze hardened. We kill them, or they will kill us all. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Numbers alone would not save them. They were not fighting prey. They were fighting predators who had learned to hunt war itself. That night in the stronghold, the humans sat in silence. The Talvorans whispered from a distance, too wary to approach. The human commander stood apart, gazing up at the sky, where the enemy fleet glimmered like cruel stars. Their expression was unreadable, but their eyes burned with quiet fire. Beside them, another human murmured, "They're breaking." The commander nodded. "Yes, fear has them now, and fear is the beginning of their end." On Talvora, hope flickered for the first time in memory. In the enemy fleet, doubt spread like cracks in stone. And between them stood humanity, few in number, deadly in silence, carrying the weight of a death world in every step. The war was far from over. The enemy was vast, their weapons endless. But now every soldier who looked upon Talvora did so with a shadow in their heart. They had heard the stories. They had seen the footage. The Deathworlders had come and the galaxy would never be the same. For 3 days the enemy fleet circled above Talvora like wolves, unwilling to strike again, yet unwilling to leave. Fear gnawed at their ranks, but rage burned hotter. Their pride had been wounded, their dominance questioned, and pride was a dangerous thing. At last, they unleashed their answer. A shadow fell across the world. Larger than mountains, longer than cities, a warship descended from the fleet. It was no ordinary vessel. It was the Dread Titan, a weapon built not to fight armies, but to crush entire planets. Its cannons could shatter continents. Its armor was thicker than anything the humans or Talvorans had ever seen. In the stronghold, alarms blared. The skies turned crimson as the massive ship's thrusters tore the atmosphere. Talvoran soldiers froze in terror, their courage draining at the sight of such a monster. One counselor whispered, "We are doomed. Even the Deathworlders cannot face this." But the humans did not flinch. The commander stepped forward, gaze locked on the descending warship. Their voice was calm, as always. "That ship is their pride. Break it, and the enemy breaks with it." The Talvorans stared in disbelief. Break it? The ship was the size of a small moon. No fleet could challenge it, let alone a handful of humans. Yet the humans moved with purpose. They checked gear, secured weapons, loaded explosives. They looked not at the ship's size, but at its weaknesses, as hunters study the armor of a beast. The High Speaker's voice trembled. "Tell me the truth, can you truly destroy it?" The human commander turned, eyes burning with iron certainty. Yes. The Dread Titan loomed closer, its cannons charging. The ground trembled beneath its power. From orbit, enemy commanders smiled, believing this would end the resistance once and for all. But the humans launched. Their ships darted from the stronghold like black arrows, streaking through smoke and flame. They weaved between beams of burning energy, dodging with impossible precision. Enemy interceptors swarmed, but human guns tore through them one after another. The Talvorans watched from the surface, hearts in their throats, tiny ships against a titan. It was madness, and yet the madness worked. The humans cut through the enemy escort, carving a path straight to the giant's heart. Then, with ruthless precision, they rammed their craft into docking bays along the hull. Explosions flared as boarding tubes slammed into place. The Deathworlders entered the beast. Inside the Dread Titan, alarms wailed. Enemy soldiers poured through, the halls armored, countless, ready to defend their pride. But the humans were already there. They moved like shadows, fast and merciless. Their weapons tore through squads before they could form ranks. Knives flashed in the dark, blades finding gaps in armor. Grenades thundered in narrow corridors, painting walls with fire. The Talvorans, watching remote feeds, could hardly breathe. These few humans against hundreds, and still they pushed forward. The commander's voice came through comms, steady as ever. "Cut the power lines, plant charges. We take this beast apart from the inside." The enemy resisted fiercely. Traps were set, choke points held, reinforcements poured in. But the Deathworlders thrived in the chaos. Where numbers failed, their ferocity triumphed. Where defense hardened, they struck from unexpected angles. Every hallway became a slaughter, every room a grave. The Talvoran soldiers listening to the feed felt their fear twist into awe. The humans were not simply fighting. They were dismantling a titan piece by piece. At last, the humans reached the core chamber, a vast cathedral of machinery glowing with the energy that powered the dreadnought's cannons. Dozens of enemy elites waited there, the best of their kind. The humans didn't hesitate. The battle that followed shook the ship itself. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Blades clashed in close combat. Explosions rocked the chamber. One by one, the elites fell, until the core itself lay vulnerable. The commander planted the final charge. Their voice echoed over comms. Charges set. Evacuate. On the surface, the people of Talvora looked up as the Titan loomed above them, its cannons glowing brighter, preparing to fire. For a moment, it seemed the world itself would end. And then the sky lit with fire. The dread Titan shuddered. Flames tore from its sides, explosions burst through its armored spine. The glow of its cannons flickered, then died. The giant groaned like a wounded beast. It tilted, burning, breaking apart. The people of Talvora screamed, not in fear but in triumph as the colossal warship fell from the heavens. Smoke still drifted across the skies of Talvora. The seas boiled where the wreck of the dread Titan had fallen. The ground trembled long after the crash, as though the world itself shuddered at the death of such a monster. But for the first time in months, the skies were free. No more bombardment, no more endless enemy fleets. Just silence. The Talvorans emerged from hiding. Families crawled out of shattered tunnels, blinking at the light of day. Children clung to their parents, pointing at the broken horizon where fire still burned. The people wept, not from despair but from relief. They were alive. Against all odds, they had survived, and it was because of the humans. Inside the stronghold, the council gathered, their chamber cracked by blasts, their robes stained with soot. Around them, Talvoran soldiers whispered the same word again and again, their voices heavy with awe and disbelief. Deathworlders. The humans entered the chamber without ceremony. Their armor was scarred and scorched, their weapons still dark with battle. They carried themselves not as victors demanding praise, but as hunters returning from a necessary kill. The High Speaker rose. His voice trembled as he spoke. You came when no one else would. You stood when no one else dared. Our world lives because of you. Every counselor bowed their heads. Some wept openly. The weight of gratitude was too great to hide. The human commander said nothing at first. Their gaze swept the chamber, cold and unreadable, until at last they spoke. We heard your call. That was enough. The speaker hesitated, then asked the question burning in every Talvoran mind. Why? Why would you risk so much for strangers you did not know? The human's eyes hardened. Because we know what it means to beg for aid. And here only silence. The chamber fell silent. No counselor dared to breathe. On our world, the commander continued, voice low, steady, unshakable, we fought alone, against storms, against beasts, against death itself. No one came for us. No one ever came. We survived because we had no choice. That is what it means to be human. They stepped closer, and though their words were quiet, the weight of them pressed heavier than any weapon. So when we heard your cry, we answered, not for glory, not for reward, but because no one should suffer alone. Tears streaked down the High Speaker's face. The council murmured, voices breaking with relief. Gratitude swelled like a tide, filling the chamber. But before hope could bloom into celebration, the human commander raised a hand. Their tone sharpened, cutting through the air. Do not mistake us, the room froze. We are your allies. Today we fought at your side, but do not forget what we are. They removed their helmet, revealing a scarred face, eyes like cold fire, eyes that belong not to a savior, but to a predator. We are Deathworlders. Everything we are, everything we know, comes from a world that tried to kill us every day of our lives. We do not yield. We do not forgive. We do not forget. The councillors recoiled, awe mixing with fear. The High Speaker bowed his head deeper. The commander's voice grew softer yet heavier, as if carved from stone. Remember this day. You called for help and humanity came. If ever you call again, we will come once more, but they let the word linger sharp as a blade. Pray you never find us as your enemy. The words settled into the chamber like thunder after lightning. The Talvorans understood then. Humanity had saved them, not out of kindness, not out of weakness, but because their nature demanded it. They were allies only by choice, by mercy. And should that mercy ever falter, the galaxy itself would tremble. Later, as the Talvorans rebuilt their shattered cities, they carved statues in honor of the Deathworlders. Children were taught the story of the day the humans came, when a handful of them stood against armies and broke the unbreakable. But in every carving, in every whispered story, there was always a warning. Be grateful. Be loyal, for the Deathworlders are allies beyond measure, but never provoke them. Above Talvora, the surviving human ships departed in silence. No banners, no speeches, no demand for tribute, just a final transmission sent across the stars for all who had ears to hear. We are humanity. We come from the death world, and if you stand against us, you will fall. The message spread far beyond Talvora. Across the galaxy, enemies shivered. Allies whispered. Neutral worlds watched with new, wary respect, for they all understood one truth now. When others beg for aid, humanity answers. And when humanity answers, the universe itself must listen. The war was over. The flames of Talvora dimmed, and the people began to rebuild. Ruins were cleared, families reunited, and the songs of survival returned to the streets. But though the scars of battle would take years to heal, one truth had already taken root. The galaxy was no longer the same, for the Deathworlders had revealed themselves. Whispers spread faster than light. Merchants carried tales across the stars, stories of a world that had begged for aid and been saved not by fleets nor by empires, but by a handful of humans. No one had heard of them before. They were not an empire. They had no vast dominion, no seat on the councils of power. But now every system, every warlord, every ruler knew the name humanity. Some scoffed. It cannot be true. No species could bring down the dread Titan. Others argued, their voices trembling. It is true. And if they could destroy a Titan, what else might they destroy? Fear began to weave itself through the stars, but so did respect. The kind born only from watching predators hunt. On Talvora itself, the legend grew with each retelling. Children played games where they pretended to be humans, charging fearlessly into impossible battles. Soldiers carved human symbols into their armor, believing the mark brought strength. Priests even began to whisper that perhaps the Deathworlders were not chance allies, but instruments of fate, sent to remind the galaxy of humility. And yet, beneath the reverence there remained unease, because the humans had given no promises, no treaties, no vows of protection. They had come when asked. They had fought, killed, and bled. Then they had left, silent as shadows. They had left only a warning behind. We are your allies, never your enemies. In the halls of power, that warning was dissected endlessly. The empires who once mocked Talvora's pleas now sat in silence, replaying the humans' words. Could such a species be controlled? Could they be bargained with? Or was it wiser never to test the limits of their patience? Military commanders studied the reports. They saw the numbers, how many humans had fought, how few ships they brought, how impossible their victory should have been. And in those numbers they saw a nightmare. For if such power could be wielded by so few, what would happen if humanity ever brought its full strength to bear? Far away in the cold of space, the human fleet returned home. To them it was not glory or conquest. It was survival, nothing more. In their eyes, Talvora was not a trophy. It was simply another scar, another proof of why the galaxy could never understand what it meant to come from a death world. One commander wrote in their logs, "They call us monsters. They call us saviors. They do not yet see the truth. We are neither. We are simply human, and human means survival at any cost." Years later, when the scars of war had faded, the people of Talvora still told the story. They told it in schools, in temples, in songs carried by travelers. They told of the day their cries were answered. But every story ended the same way, with a reminder. The Deathworlders are out there. They watch. They listen. They may come when you beg for aid, but if you face them as enemies, your world will burn. And so across the galaxy a legend was born, not of an empire nor of a conqueror, but of a species that had walked through fire since its birth, a species that feared nothing, a species that could never be broken, a legend that whispered in the dark, chilling the bravest of warriors and humbling the proudest of rulers. Humanity answers when called, but pray they never come for you.